Today I'm going to teach you 6 step-by-step DIY Halloween wreaths, bows, and candlesticks. These tutorials are beginner friendly. You'll find timestamps below in the description of this video so that you can jump ahead as you wish. If you're new to Stillwater's Wreath Designs, welcome. We're happy to have you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join us. We've got new tutorials uploading every single week. Welcome to Stillwater's Wreath Designs. Come on in. First up, we'll be making a happy Halloween polka dot wreath using the deco mesh cruffle and curl method. Hello, my wreath making friends. Come on in. How are you today? Welcome, welcome. Let me show you some of the materials that we will be using today. We've got this super cute wooden happy Halloween sign with those cute polka dots all throughout. I've got 3 different types of 10-inch deco mesh. If you can see over here in the corner of the camera, I've got 4 different types of wired ribbon that all match our sign. And then of course I've got a 15-inch work wreath form. And you guys, I am so excited. You are actually going to be able to purchase this as a wreath kit. So you'll get all the supplies that I've just shown you in a kit. If you'd like to recreate this beauty, I'll leave a link for that wreath kit for you below in the description of this video. So if you're new to wreath making, friends, let me give you a little wreath frame 101. So this is called a wire work form, and it's 15 inches in diameter. And when you get a wreath work form, it looks just like this, friends. So there are 2 levels, the upper and the lower, a boatload of ties all the way around your frame. And basically these ties are very similar to a pipe cleaner or a Chanel stem. They're just a lot stronger and more dense. There are in total 18 sets of ties on both the upper and the lower level of our wreath frame. And that's how we're going to secure our mesh down into the frame. First things first, we need to prep our mesh. So today for this specific wreath, we are going to use the cruffle and curl method. And so remember I said that we had 18 total sets of ties on our wreath frame. And so the first step is to add our cruffles into our frame, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. And we're going to use all 3 of these colors for the cruffles. So since we've got 18 ties and 3 different types of 10-inch deco mesh, we're going to need 6 cuts of each. And for the cruffle portion, I want your pieces of deco mesh to be 25 inches in length. So you can either measure out your deco mesh with a ruler or tape measure and cut them with your scissors. Or of course, utilize your self-healing mat and your rotary cutter, which if you're new to wreath making, friends, this is the most wonderful tool to add into your wreath making kit. It's basically like a mini pizza cutter, and it just lets you cut your deco mesh cleanly and with nice straight lines really quickly and efficiently. And it's just, oh, I don't know, maybe $10 to $15 or so. I'll leave a link for this guy below in the description of this video in case you'd like to grab one. So again, we're going to cut 6 pieces at 25 inches in length of each of the 3 color types. So go ahead and cut your 18 pieces of deco mesh at 25 inches in length, 6 of each color, and I'll meet you back here. Once you've got your 18 pieces of deco mesh cut, it's time to start making our cruffles. And at this point, you're definitely going to want to grab a clothespin or a chip clip, and let me show you why. Friends, if you are new to deco mesh loves to fray. And so the cruffle method is a really great method to help minimize that fray. And so we're going to add 1 cruffle to every single set of ties on our wreath frame base here. And what you want to do is just take that piece of deco mesh, bring it to your work area so that it's curl side up. And then on one end of your piece of deco mesh, you're just going to roll that end into 2 or 3 tight curls, just like that. And what that does is tuck away the raw edge of your deco mesh to help prevent that fray. And then you'll spin your piece around, Do the exact same thing on the other end, and then we're going to ruffle the rest of our deco mesh. So using your thumbs to hold that deco mesh curl in place, and then your other 8 fingers as walkers, you're just going to scrunch and gather or walk that deco mesh back into your hand. And you're going to do this all the way to the end of this piece of mesh. Once you get there, remove your chip clip. Pinch that guy in your fingers, and as you can see, we've got a curl on each end and a ruffle in the middle, hence the cruffle. It's also known as a woodland ruffle. And then you're going to come over to your work wreath form. You can start at any point here on your base, friends, because at this point we don't have a top or bottom, and every set of ties is getting 1 cruffle. You're just going to open your first set of ties into a wide V, like so. Friends, I just took a quick second and took all of my lower level ties and pointed them outwards so that my frame looks like a sunshine. And now I prefer to start at the lower level and then jump to the upper level. You can do it either way that you would like. We're going to add 1 cruffle to each set of ties. So come over to your wreath frame, open up that first set of ties into a wide V. Take your cruffle and place that all the way down to the center of that V, all the way to the base. And then give those ties a couple of tight twists. And then point them back outwards. And we've just added our first cruffle. So let's do 1 more together and then we'll speed ahead. And you'll just want to pattern your deco mesh pieces, and so I just go in a repetitive pattern. So we'll do purple, orange, black all the way through. So I've grabbed my next piece of deco mesh. I've got it in my work area, curl side up. I've got my clip handy, and at one end I'm going to roll that tightly 2 or 3 times into a curl. Use my clip to pinch that guy in place. Flip my deco mesh around. I'll make a couple of tight curls on the opposite end, and then I'm just going to walk that mesh right back into my hand or gather it, just like so. And now that I've reached the end, I'll take off my clip. I'll pinch my cruffle in my hand. And coming back to my work wreath form here, I'm going to just jump to that very next set of ties. And I'll place that cruffle all the way down to the base of that V. And I'm going to give it a couple of tight twists here. Point those guys outwards. And we've just added our second cruffle. So go ahead and add 1 cruffle to every single set of ties on both the upper and lower level, and just make sure, friends, that when you jump from the lower to the upper that you're staggering your colors. So go ahead and add your cruffles into your wreath frame, and I'll meet you back here. All right, now that we have our cruffles fully loaded into our wreath base, it's time to move on to part number 2 with our deco mesh. So go ahead and set your wreath base off to the side and grab your 3 rolls of deco mesh. So the next step in the process here is to cut our mesh into pieces for the curl portion of our base. And so remember, we've got 18 sets of ties. We're going to add 1 curl per each set of ties. And so I want you to cut 6 pieces of each of the 3 deco mesh types at 10 inches in length, and then I'll meet you back here. All right, now I've got all of my 10-inch pieces cut of the deco mesh. So I've got 6 10-inch pieces of each of the 3 colors, and we're going to add 1 curl into every single set of ties. And to add your curls in, friends, it doesn't matter what curls you add into what ties, just don't put the same color in. So on the purple you could add black or orange, on the orange you could add black or purple, and so on. Just make sure you alternate your colors. And to make a curl, you're just going to take your 10-inch piece of deco mesh, lay it on your work area, curl side up, and then just roll that piece of deco mesh into a tube or a curl. just like this, all the way to the end. And so it's approximately 1 inch to 1.5 inches in diameter there in the center. And then of course it flares at each end. And then you're just going to come over to your wreath base, and in any set of ties, making sure you're not adding the same color of deco mesh curl onto the same color of cruffle, you're going to gently untwist the ties and then seam side down. Add that guy right down to the base, right on top of your cruffle, just like that. And of course, give it a couple of tight twists and point those guys outwards. We've just added our first curl. Let's do one more together. Grab your piece of deco mesh, lay it down in your work area, curl side up, and roll this guy into a tube so it's approximately 1 inch to 1.5 inches in diameter there in the center. Come on over to your work base and add that into some ties, making sure you're varying your colors. And you're going to gently untwist those ties, place your curl down into that V, seam side down, and give those ties a couple of tight twists, just like that. And so now we've added 2 curls into our wreath base. Go ahead and get 1 curl added into each set of ties all throughout your work frame, and I'll meet you back here. All right, we've got our wreath base totally filled out with all of our cruffles and our single curls, and just look how nicely that is coming together, friends. So the next step into the process is to add our decorative signs. So if you've ordered a wreath kit from me, it's going to come to you just like this with a small hole drilled on either side, and we're going to secure those down with our ties on that top level of our wreath base. And so again, there's still no top or bottom to this wreath, so you can add it to any set of ties, and you're just going to run 1 set of ties through the hole, 1 single piece of the tie, and then you're going to count over to the 4th set. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then that 4th set is where you'll add your sign. And that's what keeps it right in the middle. So you've got it anchored down, although not yet twisted. Plus, you've got 3 sets of ties above your sign and 3 sets of ties below. And the next step is to prepare our ribbon to add into our wreath. So with your wreath kit, friends, you're going to get 4 different stacks of ribbon in this type. And we're going to add 1 ribbon tail to every single set of ties. And if you decide to purchase a kit with me, then you're going to have the exact measurement of each of the ribbon types that you're going to need. So you're just going to need to take that ribbon and cut it into 12-inch pieces, and then either dovetail or angle trim your ends. If you're recreating this on your own, let me show you a quick way to measure out your ribbon. It's also important to mention here, friends, if you are recreating this on your own with your own materials, it doesn't matter what type of ribbon that you use or what the width is, rather, just make sure that your ribbon is wired. That's what helps your ribbon to hold its shape. And so what you're going to do is just take your ribbon, measure it out to 12 inches, like so, either with your self-healing mat or your ruler. Once you've found that 12-inch spot, just go ahead and hold that with your fingers, and then just fold your ribbon onto itself accordion style for the total number of pieces that you're going to need. Once you have the total number of pieces in your ribbon stack, take your scissors and just cut off that excess, and then making sure those ends are married up, take your scissors and trim your ends. I'm going to go ahead and angle cut mine, so I'm just coming down 3/4 of an inch or so and cutting up diagonally. And then I'm going to flip that ribbon stack right over and do the exact same thing on the opposite end. What that does is give us all of our ribbon tails measured out at the same length. We've separated them and trimmed our ends all in one quick movement. So go ahead and cut your ribbon stack down to 12-inch pieces, and then I'll meet you back here to add in those ribbon tails. All right, now we've got all of our ribbon tails cut at 12 inches in length, separated, and I've angle cut my ends. And again, you could dovetail if that's your preference. So we're gonna go ahead and grab our wreath, bring it back to our workstation, and we're going to add one ribbon tail to every single set of ties. You're also going to want to grab your small snips so that we can trim our wire ties as we go. And to add a tail, friends, you're just going to take a single piece of ribbon, either eyeball to find that center, or if you find it easier, just fold that guy in half, and then that crease will identify that center point. Pinch and pleat that in the middle, so it kind of looks like a men's bow tie, and fold that down over your thumb like so. And then come to any set of ties on your wreath frame, because remember, we're going to add one tail to every single set of ties. And I'm going to give that a couple, 2 or 3 tight twists. And then I'm going to take my snips and just trim off those excess bits of wire tie. I'll take my fingers here and just curl that guy out of the way. And then I'm just going to fluff my ribbon tail. And by fluff, all I'm really doing is running those through my fingers to give a little bump and arch into the wire in our ribbon. And I'm going to point that loose V away from the center of our wreath. Let's do one more together. So grab your single ribbon tail, either eyeball to find the center or fold that guy in half. And not looking for perfection here. Just give it a pinch and pleat in the middle so it kind of looks like a men's bow tie. And fold that into a loose V over your thumb. Come to the set of ties that you want to add your tail into. I skipped one, guys, because I'm going to put a polka dot ribbon there. Give those ties a couple of tight twists. Then take your snips and trim off the remaining bits of those ties. Give those a little curl so that they're out of the way. And then just fluff those tails. And by fluff, we're just running them through our fingers, pulling those tails into a loose V away from the center of our wreath. And it's as simple as that. So go ahead and add one tail to every single set of ties throughout your wreath base, and make sure to trim off those ends as you go and curl them out of the way. Give those tails a quick fluff, and then I'll meet you back here. All right, I've added all of the tails into my wreath base, and this part's not included in the kit, friends. I actually was just running out of that roll of spider ribbon, and so I went ahead and threw a quick bow down in this corner just to use that up. Look how cute this wreath turned out. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button if you're new here to the channel, friends. Let's move on to the next tutorial and make a witch's hat. Most of the supplies used for this hat came from the Dollar Tree. You'll find a full materials and tools list for you below in the description of this video so that you can recreate this if you'd like to do so. We're going to start out by using our 10-inch deco mesh. You'll also need a couple of 6-inch zip ties and a pair of scissors. We're going to start out by wrapping the top portion of our witch's hat with our black deco mesh. I'm curling underneath the ends and then folding the 10-inch deco mesh in half just to give that some extra density and better coverage. We'll start by anchoring our deco mesh at the peak of the witch's hat with our 6-inch zip tie. You're just going to poke that right through your deco mesh and anchor it down to the wire frame. Be sure to trim off the excess bit of that zip tie. Go ahead and repeat that same step at the very peak of your hat, anchoring it down on that pointy end. Now we're going to wrap the top portion of our witch's hat with the black deco mesh, making sure you keep it folded in half as you continually wrap your way down to the brim of the hat. I found it easier to let my roll of deco mesh fall to the floor so that I could easily keep it gathered in half and wrap my hat. I found it easier later on to just continually spin the hat and not the deco mesh. Make sure you let that deco mesh overlap the previous layer all the way down to the brim of your hat. This part's a little bit a labor of love, but just keep wrapping. Once you reach the brim of your hat, go ahead and grab a couple of 6-inch zip ties and anchor that down to the wire frame, and then trim off the excess bit of deco mesh. Now I'm going to take my hot glue gun and add a couple of small pea-sized amounts of glue underneath the pleats to make sure that that deco mesh doesn't slide later. Now it's time to add our deco mesh into the brim of the hat. We're going to be using the 10-inch deco mesh again, two different colors, black and gray, and we're going to cut 12 pieces of each measured at 12 inches in length. This may vary depending on how tightly you add your mini cruffles into the brim of the hat. We'll also be adding black and purple deco mesh tubing into the mini cruffles on the brim of our hat. So we're going to need to cut 28-inch length pieces. We'll be pairing one piece per each cruffle, so you'll need equal amounts of the deco mesh tubing for your cruffles. All right, let's begin making our mini cruffles. We're going to stagger them along the brim of our hat. So we'll alternate between the black and the gray 12-inch pieces of deco mesh, making cruffles, and then making a figure 8 loop with our deco mesh tubing, adding a half of pipe cleaner around our cruffle and deco mesh tubing set, and then attaching it down into the brim of our hat. As we work our way through the brim, adding in our cruffle combinations, we're going to wrap the pipe cleaners around both the upper and the lower on those outer edges. And as we get closer to the center, we're going to stagger our deco mesh tubing and cruffle bundles back and forth between the upper wire of the brim and the lower wire, just to help give it extra depth and texture. On both sides, I wrapped the cruffle bundles around both the upper and the lower for just those first 4 on each of the sides. Then I began staggering between the upper and the lower, and for the few in the middle near that crossbar, I used a full-size pipe cleaner and wrapped around both the upper and the lower to really get a nice, compact, and full set of deco mesh tubing and cruffle bundles into our hat. Before I began assembling my cruffle and deco mesh tubing bundles, I did grab a handful of pipe cleaners and cut them in half and folded them into a loose V so that they were ready and available to secure the deco mesh tubing onto our cruffles. Be sure to twist those pipe cleaners really tightly so that they have a nice firm adherence, and do the same as you attach them around the wire frame of the brim of your hat. Once you've secured your cruffle bundles down around the wire frame of your wreath, make sure you take your small snips and trim off those excess bits of pipe cleaners and curl those ends under. As you can see, I paired the purple deco mesh tubing with my black deco mesh cruffle, and then I paired the black deco mesh tubing with my gray cruffles. It makes for a great color combination, and I alternated back and forth between the two. Once you've got all of your deco mesh and tubing cruffles added into the brim of your hat, go ahead and fluff those out, flip it back over, and now we're just going to run a quick bead of glue where those pipe cleaners meet the wreath frame to make sure that they don't slide around. Then give your glue a few minutes to dry, and we're on to the next step. Next, we're going to make a deco mesh flower piece for the tip of our hat. I'm just going to make 5 figure 8s with both the purple and the black, approximately 6 inches in total length, and I'm just going to layer them one on top of the other and secure it with a pipe cleaner. I'm just going to take a quick moment to fluff out that deco mesh tube flower, and then we'll grab a pipe cleaner and attach that to the tip of the witch's hat. Now let's add some embellishments. I've just grabbed a Halloween purple and black themed floral bush from the Dollar Tree. I've snipped off a flower and I'm hot gluing it in place right in the middle of the top of our bow. And I'm going to add a few of these glitter pumpkins, some spiders, and some more florals throughout the rest of the witch's hat. As you can see here, I'm placing a glitter purple pumpkin at the center of each of our deco mesh bundles. I'm using some floral wire pieces to stab into those pumpkins and really anchor them down in with some glue. Let's add some more florals and spiders throughout our hat. That's all there is to it. Look how cute this hat turned out. Next up, we'll be making a Halloween wreath using the Deco Mesh Poof and Curl method. Today we're going to make a super cute Halloween wreath on a Dollar Tree frame with some Dollar Tree supplies. How is everyone today? Friends, I'm going to leave a full supplies and tools list for you below in the description of this video so that you can recreate this beauty if you'd like to do so. If you'd prefer just to purchase this wreath that we're making here today, I'll leave a link for that as well below in the description. So let me show you some of the supplies we'll be using today. This is just a super cute trick-or-treat sign that I picked up from a store called Gabe's. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's kind of similar to a TJ Maxx. And we're going to be using 10-inch solid black deco mesh and 10-inch glitter orange deco mesh. We'll be making this on the 14-inch Dollar Tree wire wreath frame. And I also picked up some standard size pipe cleaners or Chanel stems, also from the Dollar Tree. Before we dive in, let's have a little Wreath 101. So if you're new to wreath making, this is what's called a wire wreath frame. You can get them from a variety of different places, but as I mentioned, this guy actually came from the Dollar Tree. And so when you take a look at your frame, it's got a little bit of a bevel to it. As you can see, it's rounded here, and then it's flat on the back, so it can rest nicely on your door. There are 4 wire rings, 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's also 6 crossbars around your wreath frame. And then the distance between each crossbar is what we refer to as a section. And there are 6 sections on this wire frame. The first thing we need to do is prep our wire wreath frame to add in our deco mesh. So if you've not already done so, go ahead and plug in your hot glue gun so that can be heating up. And we're going to grab our pipe cleaners or Chanel stems. You can grab these from Dollar Tree, any crafting store, or Amazon. And you're going to need 18 of the pipe cleaners. I always try to match my pipe cleaners as closely as I can to the colors of my wreath. However, it's not super critical because typically they're nice and tucked away. We're going to add 3 pipe cleaners per section all the way around the wire frame. And so we're going to take our first pipe cleaner and tuck that underneath rings 1 and 2. And we're going to place that right in the middle between these 2 crossbars. And you're just going to wrap that pipe cleaner around rings 1 and 2 and give it a couple of tight twists. Once you do that, point those pipe cleaners in towards the center of your wreath. And now we'll add 2 pipe cleaners around rings 3 and 4, basically centering them each a third of the way through here between these 2 crossbars. So we'll run that underneath rings 3 and 4. we're going to give those a couple of tight twists, like so, and then point those guys outwards. Let's do that one more time. Basically, you're going to want these equally spaced between the crossbars, so I've just run this pipe cleaner underneath rings 3 and 4. I'm giving it a couple of tight twists, and I'm going to poke that guy outwards. So it looks just like this. Let's do one more section together and then we'll speed ahead. So first pipe cleaner is going underneath rings 1 and 2, right in the center between the 2 crossbars. You're going to give that a couple of tight twists and point those guys towards the center of your frame. And the next 2 are going to go around rings 3 and 4, basically centered equally as best as you can between the 2 crossbars. And guys, you'll hear me say a lot, not looking for perfection here. Nobody's going to be measuring. And you can scooch them a little bit if you need to do so. And of course, those outer 2 pipe cleaners will be pointing away from the center. Excuse the background noise, guys. The neighbor is mowing. All right, now that we've completed the first 2 sections of our wreath frame, go ahead and repeat the same process, adding 3 pipe cleaners to each section all the way around your frame, and I'll meet you back here. All right, now I've added all of my pipe cleaners into my wreath frame, so you should have a total of 18, 3 per section. So now we're going to flip this guy over. And now what we're going to do is just add a pea-size amount of glue at one of the connecting points where the pipe cleaner meets our wire frame, just to keep those guys from sliding around. I'm going to lay a couple of pieces of old cardboard underneath my wreath frame, just so I don't get any glue on my cutting mat here. And again, so your pipe cleaners attach at 2 spots. You only need to add your pea-size amount at 1. That's just to keep it from sliding. Just like so. And if any of your pipe cleaners shifted while you were moving your frame around, go ahead and scoot them back in place before you add your glue. I'm going to give this just a couple of seconds here to let the glue stop dripping, and then I'm going to set our wreath frame here off to the side so we can work on the next step. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get our sign prepped. Now, because this is a heavier sign, I'm going to actually staple some pipe cleaners to the back of this guy to really ensure a good hold. If you don't yet have a crafter's stapler, they're basically more heavyweight than a desktop office stapler, but far less heavy duty than a garage stapler. And they're great for just stapling down pipe cleaners or floral wire stems into your signs and embellishments to really hold those guys in place. If you don't have one, I will leave a link for you below in the description of this video so that you can snag one and add it to your wreath making toolkit. But in the meantime, just go ahead and cut some scrap ribbon. Lay your pipe cleaner down, add a ton of hot glue, cut about 1 inch to 2 inches piece of ribbon and place it on top of that hot glue. Give it a good 30-second hold and set it off to the side to dry for a good 15 minutes, and that should do the trick. But if you're going to staple, like I am, I'm going to come to this far edge here because the sign isn't quite as wide as my normal signs. And so what I'm going to do is staple it as close to the edge as I can without, there we go, letting that staple poke through on the side, just like so. So it's probably 1/4 inch in. And then it looks just like this, guys. And then for some extra measure, I always like to run a little zigzag of hot glue right on top of that stapler. just to make sure that guy's not going to go anywhere. And now we're going to sit this off to the side so that it can be drying while we work on adding the deco mesh into our wreath. So go ahead and grab your wire wreath frame and bring it back to your work area. And you're also going to need a standard size ruler, and you'll want to have a pair of scissors handy. Today we're going to do the poof and curl method as we add our deco mesh in. And we're going to use the black 10-inch deco mesh for the poofs, guys. And so this is just a plain, fairly see-through 10-inch standard black deco mesh. And what I want you to do, as you can see, it likes to curl in on itself. You want it to be curl side down. And you're just going to lay that down in your work area. I've given myself about 18 inches or so of mesh to work with. And we're going to scrunch and gather the mesh into our fingertips to get it anchored down into our wreath frame. So I'm going to take my thumbs and leave them stationary. They're going to hold my deco mesh. And then I'm going to use my 8 fingers to just scrunch and gather the mesh back into our hand like so. So you've got this little tail. Now take that tail and fold that back under and grab a hold of it again. And what that does is tuck away the raw edge of your deco mesh. If you're new to working with deco mesh loves to fray. And so anything we can do as creators to help prevent the fray is always ideal. So keep a hold of that deco mesh. And at this point, our wreath frame has no top or bottom. We're going to start on the outer level at any of these pipe cleaners. So just come to any set of pipe cleaner ties on the lower level or outer level, open them into a wide V. Take that tail of deco mesh and you're going to place that all the way down to the base of that V so that it's laying right on top of your frame. You'll have about an inch tail. And then just take those pipe cleaners and give them a couple of tight twists to anchor that guy down. So once you've got that anchored down, it's time to make our first poof. And we're going to make 10-inch poofs. And so you're going to take your standard ruler, lay it right on top of the ties that we're anchored down to, come out to that 10-inch mark. And again, guys, not looking for perfection here. No one's going to measure your poofs. And then you're going to scrunch and gather your mesh into your hand like so. Keep it pinched between your fingers and come to that very next set of pipe cleaners. Place that pinched area all the way down to the base of the V, like so, and then give that 2 tight twists. And point those guys back outwards. And you've just made your first 10-inch poof. So let's do one more together and then we'll speed ahead. Grab your standard ruler, lay it down at your most recently set of used pipe cleaners, identify that 10-inch mark. Pinch and gather your mesh into your fingers. Hang tight with that. Come to your next set of pipe cleaners and we're just staying on that lower level, guys. Take that pinch of deco mesh and place it all the way down at the base of that V. And give it a couple of tight twists. Go ahead and add your 10-inch poofs all the way around your lower level, and then I'll meet you back here so that we can jump to the upper level. All right, it's time to add our last lower level poof. And so we're going to follow that same method, friends. Just go ahead and place your ruler down on your most recent set of ties. Come out to that 10-inch mark. Scrunch and gather your mesh. And we're going to come to where we added our tail in at the beginning and carefully untwist that pipe cleaner. And then add that last poof right on top of that tail, all the way down to the base, and give it a couple of tight twists. and you just added your last lower level poof. And so now it's time to jump to the upper level. And so to do that, you're going to take your deco mesh, gather it into your hand, and you're going to pull it cleanly and tautly. There's no poof at this point. And we're going to go up and to the next or closest set of ties. And we're going to come in behind that set of ties, keeping our mesh taut. Just like so. We're going to go all the way at the base of that V of our chenille stems or pipe cleaners and make a couple of tight twists. And now you can see that we've just successfully jumped our mesh from the lower level to the upper level right here. And it's a nice, clean, taut piece of mesh. And now we can go about adding our upper level poofs. We'll follow the same method that we used on the lower level with one exception. Your upper level poofs will only be 8-inch poofs instead of 10. We like those upper level poofs to recede in a little bit on your wreath so that that outer ring really can shine and doesn't get covered up. So we'll lay our ruler onto our set of ties at the upper level. We'll come out 8 inches. We'll scrunch and gather. It's a little bit trickier for the upper level because you have to work around your lower level poofs, but certainly manageable. And just like the lower level, we'll come to that next set of ties, open them up into a wide V, place that deco mesh all the way down to the base of that V, and give it a couple of tight twists. So let's go ahead and add our 8-inch poofs all the way around the upper level of our wreath base, and I'll meet you back here. All right, friends, it's time to add our last upper level poof. So I'm just going to add my ruler on top of my most recent set of ties, identify that 8-inch mark, scrunch and gather, and we're going to come over here to where we jumped our mesh up earlier. And again, carefully untwist those ties. And then lay that mesh right on top of where we jumped up from the lower level, all the way down at the base, and give it a couple of tight twists. Just going to fluff out that poof here. And we've just added our last upper level poof. And so now it's time to cut off this deco mesh. And so you want to be careful here, friends, that you don't accidentally cut a poof or something that you don't mean to. And so what I do is just gather my mesh here, pull it together cleanly and tautly, and then I put my hand behind it to serve as kind of a guard so I don't accidentally cut something I'm not supposed to. I come up a good 1 to 1.5 inches, and then I cut that off. That nice little tail there will keep anything from coming undone, and don't worry, friends, nobody's going to see that. So as you can see, we've begun to get some coverage, but it's still pretty light and airy. So we need to move on to round 2 of the deco mesh process. So go ahead and sit that wreath base off to the side, and you're going to need either your self-healing mat and a rotary cutter, which, by the way, friends, if you're new to wreath making, the rotary cutter is really one of the first things you should add to your wreath making toolkit. It basically is like a mini pizza cutter, and it lets you cut your deco mesh quickly and with nice clean lines. I'll make sure I leave a link for this for you below. If you don't have a rotary cutter and a self-healing mat, no worries, just grab your ruler or tape measure and a good pair of scissors. And now it's time to cut the deco mesh into pieces for our curls. And so remember, we've got 18 sets of pipe cleaner ties on our wreath base. So we're going to need 18 pieces of the black and 18 pieces of the orange. We're going to cut our deco mesh into 10-inch pieces. So you're going to need 18 10-inch pieces of the black and 18 10-inch pieces of the orange, and then I'll meet you back here. Go ahead and bring your wreath base back to our work area here. And I would recommend that you grab a chip clip or a clothespin or something of the sort. These actually came in a 10-pack from the Dollar Tree. And we're going to add 2 curls to every single set of pipe cleaner all throughout our wreath base. So I'm going to scooch that back just a little bit. And let me show you how to make a curl, friends. It's super quick and easy. You're just going to grab a piece of your deco mesh. We'll be adding one black and one orange curl to every single set of ties. Put that in your work area, and as you can see, it likes to curl in on itself. You'll want to keep that curl side up, and you're basically just going to roll this guy into a cylindrical tube, just like so. And so that middle area is probably an inch or so in diameter, and then of course it flares at each end. So once you've made your first curl, grab your clip and just pinch that guy in the middle to hold it in place. And then grab the next color and do the exact same thing. Lay it down in your workstation, curl side up, and roll your piece of mesh into a cylindrical tube, just like so. So now we've made our second curl. We're just going to place one curl on top of the other into a sloppy X, and you can come to any set of ties on your work frame here, friends, because you're going to add one orange and one black to every single set of ties. So you'll just come to any set of ties, place that deco mesh curl X right down to the base of those pipe cleaners, and give them a couple of tight twists, just like that. We've just added 2 curls to our first set of pipe cleaner ties. So go ahead and add 2 curls, one black and one orange, to every single set of ties throughout the entire wreath frame, and I'll meet you back here. All right, friends, now that we've added our curls into every single pipe cleaner tie on our wreath base, just look at the quick transformation we made. What a fantastic base. At this point, this guy is about 24 inches in diameter, so it's going to be a great size wreath, and it's probably every bit of 8 inches thick. Let's just see. About 6 inches thick. So it should fit between a standard door and a screen door. So it's time to move on to the next step. And just to give you an idea of what I'm going to do with my sign, I've actually decided to place mine right in the center of my wreath. You could also place it towards the bottom, off to one side or another, totally up to you. But mine's going to be sitting here once it's time to add that in. So I just wanted to share that with you real quickly. And let's talk about our very next step. So you're going to need some orange deco mesh tubing and some black deco mesh tubing. These both came from the Dollar Tree. And then you're also going to need a 1.5 inch orange based ribbon and a 1.5 inch black and white buffalo check. Those are both going to match with our sign. Super cute. We're going to place one ribbon tail in every single set of pipe cleaners with the exception of one on the upper level. So remember, we have 18 sets of ties. We're saving one set of ties for a bow. So we need 17 pieces in total of our 1.5 inch ribbon. You can choose which one you have 8 of and which one you have 9 of. I'm going to do 9 of the buffalo check. So let me show you really quickly an easy way to quickly cut some ribbon tails. I want your ribbon tails to be 11 inches in length. So just roll out first ribbon. Guys, I'm sorry for the noise in the background. The neighbor is still doing some yard work. So you're just going to roll out your ribbon. Identify your 11 inch mark and just pinch it with your finger, and then fold your ribbon back and forth accordion style until you have the number of pieces that you need. Once you have the total number of pieces, in my case 9, I chose to do 9 of the black and white buffalo check, trim off the rest of your ribbon. And then you're just going to want to make sure your stack is put together nicely and your ends are marrying. And you can either choose to dovetail your ends or angle trim. I'm going to angle trim. And so I've not even separated them, guys. I'm just going to come down about 1 inch, cut up on the diagonal to give me that angle cut. And then I'm going to flip my stack over. I'm going to make sure those ends are married up nicely. And I'm going to do the exact same thing, just like so. And then once you're done, you've got the total number of tails that you need. They're all equally measured. And when you cut them, you've already trimmed your ends. Easy breezy. So now repeat that same step with your orange ribbon, and I'll meet you back here. Now that our ribbon tails are all cut and trimmed and ready to go, we're going to sit those off to the side and prepare our deco mesh pieces. So if you're new to working with deco mesh tubing, friends, it's basically 1/4 inch in diameter, and it's really flexible and pliable, but it also squishes out pretty quickly. And so when you're working with deco mesh, you don't want to pull on it. You just want to let it lay organically as you're crafting with it, and let it lay as it wants to so that it doesn't flatten out. And we're going to need 8 pieces of one color and 9 pieces of the other color, measured at 21 inches in length. So I'm just going to measure that out, and remember, I'm letting it lay organically and I'm not pulling on it. I'm going to identify that 21 inch mark and cut it off, and then I can use this piece as my measuring piece. And it doesn't need to be perfect, friends. Nobody's going to be measuring. So go ahead and cut 8 pieces of one color, 9 pieces of the other at 21 inches in length, and I'll meet you back here. All right, all of my deco mesh pieces are cut and ready to go. Go ahead and bring your wreath base back to your workstation, and go ahead and grab a small pair of snips or a good pair of scissors. And now it's time to add our ribbon tails and deco mesh bows into all of our wire ties or pipe cleaner ties on our wreath base. Now remember, we're going to add 1 set of ribbon tail and deco mesh combo to every single set of ties, with the exception of 1 on the upper level. It doesn't matter, which set of ties you reserve for the bow, because at this point we've not added our sign, so there's no top or bottom. Just remember, 1 set of ties on the upper level. Don't add in any tails because we're going to add a bow. And so we've got our solid orange ribbon and then our black and white buffalo check ribbon. And then we've got our black deco mesh tubing and our orange. And so what we're going to do, I always like to start on the lower level. You can start anywhere you'd like. I'm going to grab a single piece of ribbon because we're going to add 1 ribbon tail with 1 piece of deco mesh to every single set of ties. You're going to identify that center point either by eyeballing it, or if you prefer, you can fold it in half, and then that line will give you that center point. You're just going to pinch it in the middle so it looks like a men's bow tie. And then you're going to kind of fold it into a loose V over your thumb. You'll come to any set of ties. I'm going to marry the orange ribbon with the black deco mesh tubing, and then I'll marry the orange black deco mesh tubing with the black and white buffalo check ribbon, but you can certainly add them in as you wish. So we folded that into a V. I'm going to lay it down here in my work area. I'm going to grab a piece of my tubing, and remember, we're not going to pull tautly because it will flatten it out. And with my hand, I'm going to take an end of the tubing and just lay it in my hand, pinching it with my thumb, and I'm just going to make a figure 8, just like so. And you want 1 inch to 1.5 inches of tubing left over on each end so that it doesn't come undone. But, again, guys, not looking for perfection. So you can see that my loops are not the same size. It is okay. Now I'm going to add that right on top of my ribbon tail. And I'm going to come to any set of ties on my wreath base. I'm going to add that guy in all the way down to the base of those ties. I'm going to give those ties a couple, 2 or 3 tight twists. Then I'm going to take my snips and trim off the remaining bits of those ties because we aren't going to add anything else into them. You can throw those away. I'll just fluff my tails out, and by fluffing them out, I'm just making sure they're pointing away from the center of the wreath. And I've given them a little curve with my finger. And then I'm just going to leave my deco mesh tube bow as it is and let it lay where it wants to lay. And then we'll move on to the next. So I'm going to go back and forth between the color combinations. So this time I'm grabbing my buffalo check. I'm eyeballing to find the center. I'm pinching in the middle. I'm folding it down over my thumb. This time I'm going to grab my orange deco mesh tubing. I'm going to fold it into a figure 8 and leave a bit of tail on each end. And I'm going to place this guy into the very next set of ties. I'm placing it all the way down to the base of those pipe cleaner ties. I'm going to give them 2 or 3 super tight twists. And then I'm going to grab my snips and trim off the excess bits of those pipe cleaners. Then I'm going to come back in here and just pull my ribbon forward. So run my fingers over them and move on to the next. So go ahead and add 1 ribbon tail and 1 deco mesh tube bow to every single set of ties with the exception of 1 on your upper level, and I'll meet you back here. All right, now we've added our ribbon tails and our deco mesh tube bows to every single set of ties on our frame with the exception of 1 on the upper level, and look how stunning this beauty is turning out to be. I cannot wait to see it come together. And so now the next step is to add in our sign. So you're going to want to be mindful and identify the set of ties that you've reserved on the upper level. And depending on where you would like to place your sign into your wreath, you're just going to want to make sure that it's in good coordination with those ties. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm actually going to add mine to the center of my wreath and down just a tad. And so my ties are here in the upper left-hand corner between 10 and 11 on a clock. And so what I'm going to do is take my 2 zip ties and just give them a couple twists here and add my sign into my frame. And so I'm going to poke these ties through, and I'm going to make sure they're wrapped around at least 2 of the rings of the wire frame so that they're nice and stable. And then I'll meet you back here. So I've just flipped my wreath over for you so that you could see this, friends, and I'm going to just make sure that that's nice and tight. I'm twisting those pipe cleaners several times. And I always prefer, if it's possible, based on your placement, that at least 1 set is tied around a crossbar. That just keeps your attachment or your sign from sliding around. And so now I've given each set of ties several tight twists. And now I'm just going to trim off my ends here. And then I'm going to take my fingers and just poke that tie kind of back under so it doesn't scratch my customer's door. And then I like to take my hot glue gun and just put a little dollop of glue right over where that pipe cleaner meets the wire frame, just to help give it some stability and helps to reduce the slide of your sign. While that glue is drying, you guys, I have to show you something. I've had several people ask me about this, and I'm kind of late to the game with this, but you know, you've seen me grab a couple drinks here and there throughout my videos if you're not new to my channel. And I recently bought this Hydro Flask water bottle. It comes in a million different sizes and colors, different types of tops. But you know, when I'm talking during my wreath videos, I get frequent drinks. And I just recently purchased this, and this guy stays cold forever. I wish I would have bought one of these eons ago. Basically, I fill this with, I don't know, maybe a half a cup of ice and water. And I usually drink a couple of these a day, and I don't have to replace my ice at all. In fact, the next day there's still some ice in there. This thing is like magic. Anyway, I've had lots of you ask, so I just wanted to show you what it was. It's a hydro flask. I'll leave a link for you below. I actually grabbed it from Amazon and I love, love, love it. All right, now that our glue is dry, let's flip this beauty back over. Look how stinking cute that is. If you've got any ribbon tails or curls, deco mesh curls or tubing bundles that you wanted to pull out and free from behind your sign, just go ahead and do that now. And here's our reserved set of ties or chenille stems for a bow. And so I'm going to grab some ribbon and we'll make a quick bow to add up into the corner. All right, I'm going to scoop my wreath off to the side so that we can make this quick bow. And I'm going to make a simpler bow, guys, because I think I'm going to add a little bitty buffalo check pumpkin into the center of this. So I've grabbed a buffalo check 2.5-inch wired ribbon and a glittery orange with some black and white trim, 1.5-inch wired ribbon. Just use any coordinating ribbon that you have. Any kind is fine as long as it's wired. And then you'll need a zip tie or a chenille stem or something to secure your bow. And friends, I know that bows are really the toughest part of wreath making when you first start out. It was for me too. So I'm going to move pretty quickly through making this bow. But I will leave a couple of step-by-step slow moving bow making tutorials for you in the description of this video so that you have that if you need to reference it. So work with me here real quickly while I make our bow. All right, I've quickly made my bow here and secured it down with a 6-inch zip tie. Just going to trim off those ends. And I've literally just got 2 loops and 2 tails of each ribbon type here. And we're going to get our wreath back into our work area and add this guy into our chenille stems. Now let me show you a little trick. Sometimes when you add your bows, you need them to be secure, of course, but maybe the chenille stems are recessed really deeply as this is, and you don't want to push your bow all the way down to the base because then it's going to get lost in your wreath. So what you can do is take your zip tie and create a false bottom by giving it a couple of twists closer towards the surface where you want your ribbon to lay. Now, some people prefer to fluff their bows prior to adding it in. I actually do so after. You can do whatever method is comfortable for you. So I'm just going to lay this guy right on top of those pipe cleaners and give them several tight twists. Normally I would trim off those excess bits, but because they're so short, I'm just going to curl those guys back and out of the way, like so. And now I will fluff out my bow. And then grab your scissors and trim your ends. Again, dovetail or angle, either is fine. How stinking cute. All right, it's time for the last step. So I grabbed a bag of these foam pumpkins from Hobby Lobby. They are just under 2 inches in diameter and they're foam with cloth covering. And originally I was going to add one to the center of my bow, but I think I've changed my mind. I think I'm going to place 3 around our wreath here. And I'm going to use 3 of the same size of these buffalo check. Just ties really nicely with our sign. And let me show you how we're going to attach them in, friends. So anytime I'm working with florals on any project, if it's got a really sturdy base or stem, wire stem, I keep these guys because they're great to add embellishments into your wreaths. And let me show you what I mean. So I just keep these in a jar on my work area. I'll trim off a stem here, and I always leave it a little bit longer. You can always take more off, but you can't put it back on. Then I'll decide where I want to lay my embellishments. So I think for the purposes of this wreath, they're going to go like so. So a couple of them are at an angle. Then I'll take my snips and just kind of cut a little hole. And I'll poke that piece of stem right down in there. I'll pull it back out and add a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch little bitty bead of hot glue. Just make sure that guy doesn't go anywhere. And I'll poke it back in. And then what you can do is just add that guy right down in there for your embellishment. So I'm going to run about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch bead of glue at the end here. And then I'm going to come over to my wreath and add that guy right down in. And now I know it's not going to go anywhere, and I'm not counting on that mesh alone to hold that fellow in place. I'm going to do the same thing for these next two. All right, friends, this beauty is finished. How stinking cute did this turn out? I will add a picture of this hanging on my door at the end of this video. Please be sure to give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed creating with me today. And of course, if you're new here, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. We've got new tutorials uploading every week. Thanks, friends. Happy crafting. Today I'm going to teach you how to make this super easy Halloween bow in less than 5 minutes. For this project, you'll need 2 2.5 inch wired Halloween ribbons and 2 1.5 inch wired Halloween ribbons, a good pair of scissors, and a zip tie. Measure out each of the 2.5 inch wired ribbons at 20 inches and cut 1 strip of each, and then you'll measure out each of the 1.5 inch wired ribbons at 18 inches. So you'll have 1 piece of each of the ribbon types. Now it's time to dovetail the ends. To dovetail your ends, you're just going to fold the ribbon in half and then bring your scissors down about 3/4 of an inch on the folded side, not the open side, and cut up diagonally to the corner to give you that nice V shape. Make sure you have your zip tie handy, and starting with the 2.5 inch ribbons, fold each one in half, pinch and pleat in the middle, and start layering your ribbons on top of one another in an X fashion so that your loops and tails are going in the opposite direction. Then you'll finish up with the 1.5 inch ribbon. Grab your zip tie and secure around the middle. Now it's time to fluff out our bow. I prefer to start at the bottom, separating my tails and fluffing out my loops, working my way towards the top of my bow. I'm just forming each layer into an X pattern and then using my fingers opening up each loop so that it's nice and full. Next up, we'll be making a Hello Pumpkin fall wreath using the Deco Mesh Poof and Curl method. Hello, my wreath making friends. How are you today? Come on in. I am so excited to make this particular wreath, friends. I've been waiting for this sign. How stinking cute is this Hello Pumpkin fall wreath sign? How is everyone today? Just want to take a quick second and say to all of the Stillwaters friends, thank you for coming back in for another tutorial. I'm really excited to dive into fall. And for all of my new friends who have just found their way to the channel, welcome, welcome. We're so happy to have you. Stillwaters Wreath Designs is all about wreath making and door swag making, step-by-step DIY tutorials for beginners, so you don't need any experience to create with me. As you watch the video today, friends, be sure to hit that thumbs up if you enjoy this tutorial. That helps my little channel to grow. And if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got new tutorials uploading every week. I'm going to quickly walk you through the materials and the tools we'll be using for this wreath, but there's also going to be a full materials and tools list for you below in the description of this video so that you can recreate this beauty if you'd like to. We're going to use this super cute Hello Pumpkin sign. 2 different rolls of 10-inch deco mesh. We're going to use a solid black and a metallic orange. We'll be using this 15-inch work wreath frame. I've got several different types of 1.5 and 2.5 inch wired ribbon that coordinate with our sign. I grabbed a couple of packages of mesh tubing that we may or may not use. And of course, you're going to need your glue gun, a good pair of scissors, your small snips. If you like to cut your deco mesh with the self-healing mat and the rotary cutter, be sure to grab that. And of course, we'll use a couple of mounting brackets for our sign. And you'll also need 2 either floral wire stems, zip ties, or pipe cleaners to attach your sign down into our wreath. All right, friends, first things first, hopefully your glue gun is plugged in and hot and ready to go. We need to go ahead and prep our sign. And so what we're going to do to prepare our sign to add it into our wreath, friends, is attach a couple of mounting brackets to our sign. If you are new to wreath making, mounting brackets will soon become your best friend. These are super cost effective. You can buy these in packages of 100 for just a handful of dollars on Amazon. I'll leave a link for that for you below if you'd like to grab some. But basically they're just 1 inch by 1 inch square brackets. And so this black portion, friends, is the top part. And if you can see, hopefully the camera is capturing, there's holes all the way around that bracket so that you can run your zip ties, your pipe cleaners, or your floral stems right through there to attach them down into your wreath. And then the back side has just got some really sticky 3M tape that allows you to secure it down to your sign or your attachment. I nearly always use 2, 1 on either end, somewhere in the middle there, and they don't have to be square, friends. No one's going to see this. So I just plop those guys onto the sign, give them a good hard push. And then for some extra stability, I just grab my glue gun and run a quick bead of glue all the way around that mounting bracket. So it's partially on the bracket and partially on our sign. Perfect. And then we'll set this guy off to the side so that we can let it dry while we're getting our wreath prepared with deco mesh. All right, friends, so let's just have a little bit of Wreath 101. This is called a wire wreath work form, and it comes just as you see it here. It is 2 layers deep, so you've got a lower level and an upper level. They're probably 3 inches or so apart. They're very sturdy, and these are what's called ties, and this is how we actually attach our deco mesh down into our wreath. And they're basically like a very stiff version of a pipe cleaner or Chanel stem. And on the 15-inch, which is the standard size that most wreath makers use, there are 18 ties in total on this work wreath frame, friends. There's 8 on the top and 10 on the bottom. And so what we're going to do, friends, is the upper level of ties, we're going to keep them as they come, just pointed towards the center of your wreath. But the lower level of ties, I want you to actually point them the opposite way. So they're pointing away from the center of your wreath. Just like this. It's going to look like a sunshine when you're done. Perfect. So your wreath frame should look something like this. And you're also going to need a ruler if you're not using your self-healing mat, and just a standard 12-inch ruler will do. You could also use a tape measure if that's what you have handy. And the method that we're going to use today, friends, is the poof and curl method, using our 2 types of 10-inch deco mesh. And so our poofs are going to be black, and our curls are going to be this shiny metallic orange. And so we're going to set our orange off to the side. And when we do the poof and curl method, friends, I prefer to always start at the lower level of your wreath. It doesn't matter where. At this point, there's no top or bottom. And so if you're new to deco mesh, friends, it loves to fray. And this method is a really great method to prevent the fray because it's got very few exposed cuts or raw edges, which is where that fray occurs. And so this is a really safe method to help prevent that fray. And what I want you to do, friends, is take your black deco mesh, and we want that, as you can see, it likes to curl in on itself. We want that to be curl side down. So what I want you to do is roll that deco mesh curl side down. And we're going to scrunch and gather the deco mesh into our hands. So your thumbs are going to be your stationary fingers, and then you'll use your other 8 fingers for your working fingers. So at the edge of your mesh, press down with your thumbs on that deco mesh, and then take your fingers and just scrunch and gather or walk that deco mesh back into your thumbs until you've got it completely walked back into your fingers. If you've got any straggles or frays, just go ahead and trim them off, or as I say, give your deco mesh a little haircut. And we're going to keep this pinched into our hand here, and then I'm going to actually fold this tail of deco mesh under. So I'm just going to fold it right under. And the reason I do that, friends, is to tuck away that raw edge even more to help prevent that fray. And so now that we've gathered that into our hands and we've tucked away that end, come to any set of ties on the lower level, open them into a wide V, and take your deco mesh that we've just scrunched and gathered and folded under and place it all the way down at the base of that V on your set of ties. Then give it a couple of tight twists and point those guys right back outwards. And we've just secured down our deco mesh. And we're going to make 10-inch poofs on this lower level, friends. And so what I want you to do is take your ruler, and you're going to do this all the way through our wreath as we add our poofs. You're going to lay your ruler right at the most recent set of ties where you've attached your mesh. You're going to find the 10-inch mark, and it doesn't have to be perfect, guys. Nobody's going to measure. And once you've identified that 10-inch mark, you're going to scrunch and gather just like we did when we started, pressing down with your thumbs and then using your 8 fingers to walk that mesh back into your thumbs, like so. Go ahead and pinch that with your hand. Roll out a little bit of this. You're going to jump to the very next set of ties on your lower level. Open them up into a wide V. Take your deco mesh where you've gathered it into your fingers, place it into the V all the way down to the center, and give it a couple of tight twists, and point those guys back outwards. Just fluffing out my poof there a little bit. And we've just added our first 10-inch poof, friends. Let's go ahead and do one more together, and then we'll zoom ahead. So we're going to take our ruler at the very last set of ties where we left off, place our ruler onto those ties. We're going to come out 10 inches, again, not looking for perfection. We're going to hold our deco mesh down with our thumbs and with our 8 fingers, scrunch and gather or walk that mesh back into our hands. We're going to keep that pinched, and we'll come to our very next set of ties, staying on that lower level. And we're going to press that deco mesh all the way down to the base of the V, and give it 2 tight twists, and point those ties outwards, just like we had done before. Just going to fluff out my poof here a little bit, and we've just added our second poof. Let's go ahead and add our 10-inch poofs all the way around the lower level of our wreath frame. I'll meet you back here. All right, it's time to add our last lower level poof. And so we're going to actually be securing it down where we started. I just wanted to walk through that with you really quickly to show you how to add mesh on top of mesh. And so just like before, you're going to measure out 10 inches, scrunch and gather your mesh into your hands. You're going to come back to the set of ties that we have already secured, because remember, that's where we started. And you're going to gently untwist those ties. And as long as you're gentle, friends, it's not going to disturb your mesh, as you can see. And you're going to take your last lower level poof, add that right on top of that tail where we started, and give it a couple of tight twists. Point those guys outwards. Fluff your poof a little bit, and we've just added our last lower level poof. And so now it's time to jump up to the upper level and begin adding poofs there. So to jump up to the upper level, friends, you're basically going to identify the closest set of ties to where you left off and where you'll be jumping, because we're not going to cut our mesh. And it doesn't matter if the tie is directly above, as it is here in my case, which by the way isn't typical. I just got lucky today. It could be behind, it could be in front. It truly doesn't matter. All you're going to do is take your deco mesh, gather it in your hand, and pulling it tautly, kind of scrunching that into a clean bunch of mesh. Open up those V's. Add that mesh right down into the base, just as we had done earlier, and give it a couple of tight twists. And we've just jumped our mesh from the lower level to the upper level. So as you can see here, friends, there's no poof, there's no design at all. We literally just pulled that mesh together cleanly in our hands and tautly and jumped it up to that closest set of ties. And then we're going to point those guys out just like we've been doing. Now we're going to follow this exact same pattern as we did on the lower level, friends. However, our upper level poofs are only going to be 8 inches. I like to reduce the size for the upper level for a couple of reasons. One, it basically lets that mesh recede a little bit, so you'll still be able to see all of the beauty of that lower level once we're finished. And secondly, it helps reduce the amount of deco mesh that you use, therefore your cost. So we're going to follow the same method, friends. You're just going to place your ruler onto your last set of ties here, which is where we jumped up. And this time we're only going to measure 8 inches. It's a little bit trickier to scrunch and gather on the top, friends, because you can't really lay it on a flat surface, but certainly very doable. You'll pinch that in your hands, come to that next set of ties, press that deco mesh all the way down to the base, and give it a couple of tight twists and point those guys outwards. You'll just fluff up your poof a little bit. And we'll move on to the next one. We'll do one more together and then we'll speed ahead. So I'm going to place my ruler right on that last set of ties. I'm going to come out 8 inches. And remember, we're not looking for perfection here. Nobody's going to be measuring your poofs. We'll scrunch and gather. We're going to come to that next set of ties and open them up into a wide V. Press our deco mesh all the way down to the base. Give it a couple of tight twists. Point those guys outwards. Fluff our poof a little bit and move on to the next. Go ahead and finish adding your 8-inch poofs all the way around your upper level of your wreath frame here, and I'll meet you back when it's time to add our very last poof. Okay, friends, it's time to add our last upper level poof. So we're going to follow the same method that we've been doing. I'm just going to take my ruler, place it at my most recent set of ties, identify that 8-inch mark, scrunch and gather the mesh back into my fingers. I'm going to pinch that with my hand here. And just like we did on the lower level, friends, we're going to gently untwist this set of ties so that we can add our mesh right on top of our starting point mesh for the upper level. Press it all the way down to the base of that V, right on top, and give it a couple of tight twists. And point those guys outwards. It's going to fluff up my poof there a little bit, and grab my pair of scissors, and we're going to cut off the remaining bit of deco mesh. Now, friends, you want to be careful when you do this so that you're not cutting something you don't mean to. And the easiest way I found to do that is to take our leftover mesh here once we've added it down in. I'm just kind of collecting it in my hands tautly. I keep my hand to the back so that I'm protecting our poofs that we don't want to cut. And about an inch away from that last set of ties, I want to leave that inch tail. I'm just carefully trimming. And there we have it, friends. We've just trimmed off our excess bit of mesh. And we've got the first layer of deco mesh fully added into our wreath base. And it's time to move on to step 2 with our mesh. So as you can see, friends, we've begun to get some good coverage, but it's still pretty light and airy, and we really want to build this up into layers. So go ahead and set your wreath base off to the side, and either grab your self-healing mat and your rotary cutter or a good pair of scissors and a tape measure. And so the next part of this, friends, is to cut our deco mesh up so that we can add in our curls. And if you remember earlier on in this tutorial, I mentioned that there are 18 ties on our work wreath frame or on our base. And we're going to add 1 orange curl and 1 black curl to each set of ties. So we're going to need 18 cuts of our orange and 18 cuts of our black. And this is, remember, 10-inch deco mesh, and I like to cut things in squares for curls. So we're going to cut 10-inch pieces. And all you need to do, friends, is either with your scissors or your rotary cutter, which, let me just pause real quickly here and give you a little pro tip. If you are new to wreath making and you've not yet added a rotary cutter to your toolkit, a rotary cutter is a great way to really cut your deco mesh quickly with really nice clean edges. And it basically operates like a mini pizza cutter, friends. And so I'll leave a link for my favorites, what you see here below in the description of this video, if you'd like to add that to your toolkit. At any rate, you're just going to measure out 10 inches of your deco mesh and give it a cut. And you're going to need 18 10-inch pieces of your orange, and you're going to need 18 10-inch pieces of your black, and then I'll meet you back here. Once you've got your deco mesh pieces cut for the curls, friends, go ahead and grab your wreath base and bring it back to your workstation. So you should have 18 cuts of the orange, 18 cuts of the black, and each one should be approximately 10 inches. And we're going to move on to making the curls. And remember, I said earlier, friends, we're going to add 2 curls to every set of ties on both the upper and the lower level here. I would recommend grabbing a chip clip, a clothespin. You can grab these in a pack of 10 from the Dollar Tree. Something to help hold your mesh, and you'll see why here in just a minute. So you're going to grab your piece of deco mesh, just one of them. It doesn't matter which color, because we're going to be putting 1 black and 1 orange into every single set of ties. And as you can see, friends, it likes to curl in on itself. And we want this deco mesh piece to be curl side up and then rolling on the raw edge side where you cut, not the clean side. So in the natural direction that it wants to curl, we're just going to roll this piece of deco mesh into a tube. So I'm just going to keep on rolling all the way to the end of this piece, like so, until you've got a cylindrical tube, and that's probably 1.5 inches in diameter in the center. And so once you've rolled your first curl, grab your chip clip or clothespin and just pinch that guy right in the center there to hold it. And then grab the next color, in our case orange, and do the exact same thing. So my mesh is curl side up, Just going to roll this guy into a tube. That's going to be approximately 1 inch or 1.5 inches of diameter in the center. Just going to hold that together with my fingers and grab my first curl, and we're just going to form these into a loose X, one on top of the other, and it doesn't matter which color's on top of which because they're going to all blend soon anyway. And it doesn't matter if you start at the top or the bottom because we're going to do this with every single set of ties. So I'm just taking my black curl, my orange curl, they're in this loose X. I'm going to place them down to the center of a set of ties. Doesn't matter where you start, all the way down to the base. Take those ties and give it a couple of tight twists. Point those guys outwards, and we've just added our first set of curls into our wreath base. Let's do one more set together, friends, and then we'll speed ahead. So grab your piece of deco mesh, laying it on your workstation, curl side up. Roll this piece of deco mesh into a cylindrical tube that's 1 inch to 1.5 inches in diameter at that center point. It will flare on the ends. That's totally fine. Grab your clip and pinch that guy in the middle. Set it off to the side. We'll grab our orange and do the exact same thing. Curl side up. Rolling it into a cylindrical tube. Pinching it in the middle. Grabbing that first curl that we made, making a loose X with the 2 curls, jumping to the next set of ties. I'm just going to work my way around on both the upper and lower levels here, friends. I'm opening up those ties into a wide V, pressing those curls or that X all the way down to the base. I'm going to give it a couple of tight twists. I'll point those ties outwards. Fluff out my X. I'm just making sure those loops didn't get tucked away. And we've just added our second set of curls. Go ahead and add 1 black and 1 orange curl to every set of ties throughout the remainder of your wreath base, and I'll meet you back here. Oh my goodness, you guys, this base is looking fantastic. It's a very fall, very Halloween-y, and super bougie. We're on our way to something great, guys. So at this point, our wreath is measuring probably 28 inches in diameter and every bit of, let's just see, about 8 to 10 inches thick, depending on where we measure. So this is definitely going to be a big beauty. I'm so excited to see this once we're finished. So the next step, friends, is to add in our decorative sign. And at this point, your attachments and the glue are nice and dry. So you can choose what you want to use to attach your sign into your wreath base, friends. You could use zip ties, you could use Chanel stems, although, or pipe cleaners. As thick as this is, you would need to double them up. Or you can use some floral wire stems, which is exactly what I'm going to be using. Forgive me, I don't know the gauge of these, friends. I've popped off the top here, but they are heavy gauge floral wire stems that are 18 inches in length. And this is my preferred way to add signs and heavier attachments or embellishments down into a big deco mesh wreath, because it really gives a good secure attachment and it pokes through the mesh really well. So what we're going to do is take our, in my case, floral wire stem, or whatever you're using, and just fold that guy in half. That just identifies that center point for you, and run that right through your mounting bracket. And then I just like to give it a loose twist or two just to keep that guy from sliding off while we're working. And we'll do the same thing on the other end. I'm going to fold it in half to identify the center point, run that through my bracket, and give it a couple of loose twists to keep it secure. And it's time to add our sign in. So, you know, this is your wreath, friends. So everything I'm showing you, of course, is just a recipe. Feel free to follow it or tweak it as you go, whatever your preferences are. But I'm going to add mine directly into the center. And then, of course, per my usual, I'll be throwing a bow in at the upper left-hand corner and at the bottom right-hand corner. And so I'm just going to make sure I have a set of ties available in those areas. And now I'm going to just take my wire ties and poke them straight through. I like to add them around where the ties are here on our work wreath form, just because it keeps it from flattening any of our poofs. And I'd like to do just one side at a time, friends. So I've run that through. Give yourself some grace. This just takes a little bit of time. I'm going to flip it over and let me show you a quick trick, friends. First of all, whatever you're using to attach, you want it to go around at least 2 of the 3 rings, and preferably both, but if not both, at least one. You want to go around a crossbar. That just keeps your sign from sliding. I'm going to give it a couple of loose twists just to make sure it's still in the center as I want it. I'll flip it over, and it is. And so I'm going to do the same thing on this other side, trying to add it right around some of the ties here. We'll flip this guy over, find our wires, and I've got one around the crossbar, so that'll give us some extra stability. It's going to give it a couple of twists to make sure it's still where we want it. Yep, it sure is. All right, and so now I'll flip it back over and give it 2 or 3 more tight twists on both sides. And basically, friends, I twist these at about 80% tension because you want them tight enough that your sign is nice and sturdy and not going to go anywhere. However, you don't want it so tight that your sign recedes down into your wreath or that tension pops off your brackets. Once you've got that secure, go ahead and trim off your excess bits of wire. And then I just like to grab my needle nose pliers and pinch those ends together and kind of twist them back into the wreath. That way, if somebody grabs by chance the back side of your wreath, they're not going to get poked, nor is the door. And it is looking great. So at this point, just double check the wreath and that all of the ties are pointing outwards and nothing's gotten accidentally tucked away underneath your sign. If I have any curls, I always pull those forward just because they're just too stinking cute to not have their opportunity to be seen. And now we're ready to move on to the next. And so that will be adding our bow. So I'm going to move this off to the side and we're going to make our 2 bows because remember, I'm going to be adding one in the upper left and one in the bottom right. So let's get those made and we'll add them in. All right, friends, we're going to be making these 2 bows. So let me show you the ribbon that I have here. I've got a ton of them. They are so stinking cute. They are all actually 1.5 inch ribbon, with the exception of this foiled orange and black, which is 2.5 inch. You can use as many or as few ribbon types as you like. In order to save some time on this video, I'm going to be speeding through the making of these bows, but don't worry, if you struggle with bow making, I will leave 2 separate bow making tutorials for you below in the description of this video. Now that we have both of our bow stacks made, friends, we're going to set those off to the side and grab our reeds and bring them back to our workstation and get these bows added in. Everyone has their own preference on how they work with their bows and when they fluff them out. I actually prefer to fluff mine out after I've added them into the wreath, but you can certainly do so beforehand if that's your preference. And so making sure that the tails and the loops are still going the right direction, and they are. I'm going to come up to my upper left-hand corner here, gently open up those ties, and add that bow stack right into the set of ties, pressing it all the way down on top of my curls, giving these ties 3 or 4 tight twists. And then I'm going to take my snips and trim off the excess bits of those ties because we won't need them anymore. And then I'm going to just pinch them together and push those towards the back and out of the way. So at this point, friends, I'm just going to do a quick rough fluff of my bow. And I'm just making sure that my loops and my tails are all going in the direction that I want them to go. And I prefer to start at the bottom side of my ribbon and work my way up. But again, that's personal preference. You can sure do it how you wish. And as you can see, I kind of got like an X pattern going here, which is again, personal preference. So I've just done a rough fluff of my bows, pulling them in an X formation. I'm going to go ahead and angle trim those. You can dovetail those if that's your preference. I just caution you to trim your tails gently, friends. You can always take more off, but you can't put any more on. So I tried to give them a little bit of a varying length, but it's your wreath. You can sure trim them how you would like. And because they're wired, they'll hold their shape. And I like to just take my fingers and run that through, run those ribbon tails right through to really get the curve and the angle that I want. Once you've fluffed your upper bow, which is so cute, go ahead and jump down to the lower level and we're going to do the same thing. Just make sure all of your loops and tails are going in the right direction. Find the set of ties that you'd like to add it into. Gently open those ties. Add that ribbon stack all the way down to the base of those set of ties, right on top of your curls. Give those ties 2 or 3 tight twists. Grab your snips and trim off the excess bits of ties. You won't need those anymore. You can throw those away and then just poke those remaining bits back and under and out of the way, and go ahead and fluff out your lower bow. All right, friends, so let's move on to the next step, and that is to create some ribbon tails. So remember, we've got 18 sets of ties in total. We've already used 2 sets for our bougie bows. So we've got 16 ties remaining. So we're going to use our 1.5 inch ribbons, and we're going to add 1 ribbon tail for all the remaining sets of ties. And so remember, we've got 16. We've got 4 different types of 1.5 inch ribbon. So we're going to need 4 cuts of each ribbon type at 10 inches in length. So what I'm going to do, friends, is just measure out my ribbon at 10 inches, mark it with my finger. This is a quick way to cut your ribbon. I'm going to fold it in half onto itself until I've got 4 pieces. So there's 2, 3, and 4. And I'll grab my scissors, trim the rest of the ribbon off. Go ahead and separate your ends. And then we're going to lay them down all pretty side up. We'll pick up our little stack of ribbons here and just make sure those ends are married together. And because we angle trimmed our bow tails, friends, I'm going to angle trim these as well. So I'm just going to come down about 3/4 of an inch, cut up to the diagonal to the corner, flip it around and do the same thing. I'm marrying up those ends, coming down 3/4 of an inch and cutting up on the diagonal. And as you can see, friends, my angle cuts are going in the same direction. So make sure that you have 16 pieces in total. Go ahead and cut and trim your ribbon tails at 10 inches in length, and I'll meet you right back here. Once you've got your 16 ribbon tails cut and the ends trimmed, go ahead and grab your wreath and bring it back up to your workstation. Oh my gosh, you guys, this is going to be so cute. So at this point, friends, all we're going to do for this last step is add 1 ribbon tail to all of the remaining sets of ties on both the upper and lower level. And because I've got 4 different types here, I'm just going to alternate back and forth. And so to add your tail in, friends, you're just going to pick up one at a time. Either fold it in half or just eyeball it to find that center. Pinch and pleat. Come over to your set of ties. Spread them into a V. Place that tail all the way down at the base of that V and give it 2 or 3 tight twists. Trim off the excess bit of your ties because you won't need those anymore. I like to just kind of push them back and out of the way. And then I fluff my tail. And by fluff, friends, all I really do is pull it in a loose V away from the center of my wreath. And I run my fingers over those tails to give it a little bump. Let's do one more together. I'm just going to eyeball to find that center, pinch and pleat, jump over to my very next set of ties, add that right to the center, give it a couple, 2 or 3 tight twists, trim off those ends, push those guys back and out of the way, and fluff your tail. And that's it. I'm just going to variate between the 4 different styles that I have here and get the rest of my ties loaded with a single ribbon tail, and I'll meet you back here. All right, friends, the tails are fully loaded, and how stinking cute is this wreath? I'm just going to do this quick final fluff of our bows, which are looking pretty good. Not much needs done to them. And this fall beauty is finished. I hope you enjoyed creating with me today. If you did, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up. It helps my little channel to grow. And make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new here. Let's make this fall grapevine pumpkin door hanger in less than 20 minutes. We're going to do something a little bit different today. We are actually going to make a grapevine pumpkin door hanger. This door hanger actually came from Hobby Lobby, and it comes just as you see it here. And it is 20 inches wide and 19 inches tall. So it's a pretty good size. It is a little thin. I would say that this grapevine width is maybe a ½ an inch or so. So it's perfect for hanging between your door and your storm door. All right, friends, so what you're going to need for this project, it's going to be a pretty simple and quick and super cute project. Of course, you're going to need this pumpkin grapevine hanger from Hobby Lobby. You're also going to need some wired ribbon of choice. We're going to make a bow and add it up here. I also grabbed some deco mesh tubing to add into my bow. We'll see what we think of that. And then you're also going to need some florals. I just grabbed a little bit of greenery and some frosted orange glitter twigs, and we'll grab some more as we decide we need them. Of course, you're going to need a good pair of scissors, a few zip ties or floral wire. And friends, you'll find a full materials and tools list in the description below of this video. So if you'd like to recreate it, you're sure able to do so. So the first thing we need to do, friends, is create our bow. And you can add your bow anywhere on your design that you would like. Just keep in mind that what you see me doing here today is a recipe. So you can follow it exactly, or you can make as many changes and tweaks as you would like. It's your wreath, create it how you'd like. For my purposes, I'm going to add a bow either in the center of the top here or to the upper left. And then we'll probably add those florals behind it. You could also put it at the bottom, on the side, any place that there's grapevine, feel free to add it. I'm going to scoot that guy off to the side so we can start on our bow. I just grabbed 3 different ribbon types here, friends. I've got a 2.5 inch metallic orange and black, a 1.5 inch black and white chevron, and a 1.5 inch orange glitter with some black and white edging. And then I also grabbed some deco mesh tubing. We may or may not use it. We'll see. So I've got my scissors handy, and I've got a 6-inch zip tie handy as well to secure my bow when I'm finished. You can either use a zip tie, some floral wire, or a Chanel stem, whatever you prefer. All right, so I think I'm going to actually add my bow right here in the center point. It's just a good anchor, and then I'll have that greenery flowing back behind it. So let's go ahead and make our bow, friends. If you still struggle with bow making and you need a little bit slower, more in-depth bow making tutorial, I do have 2 or 3 step-by-step bow making tutorials here on my channel, so feel free to go back and reference those as you need. So I'm going to make my tail probably about 9 inches in length, 9 to 10 inches in length, and I'm going to pinch and pleat that in my fingers. So it's pinched together like so. And friends, you know, there's a million different ways you can make bows. None of them are better than the other. It's just what you're most comfortable with. So, you know, feel free to give my method a try. And if that's not the best fit for you, you know, just keep plugging along. They can be tricky. So in my case, friends, I always keep my left hand predominantly as my holding hand and my right hand as my working hand. So I'm going to twist that ribbon underneath my fingers so that when I make a loop, that pretty side is out. And I'm just going to have 2 loops of every single ribbon type. And then I'm going to pinch and gather underneath my thumb and my forefinger, and I'm going to gently release that pressure so that I can twist this ribbon again. And then I'm going to make my last loop. Before I pinch it, I'm going to just hold the loops one on top of the other to make sure they meet in the same place. That tells me that my loops are nearly the same size. And friends, you know, I like to tell people we're not looking for perfection here. So don't worry about that. So I've pinched that underneath my finger. I'm going to run my tail out and cut that guy off, and we're done with ribbon number 1. So let's move on to the next ribbon. And friends, you can use as many different ribbon types as you like. You can just use one and make multiple bows. Whatever type of ribbon you use, I just encourage you to make sure that your ribbon is wired. That's what helps it to hold its shape and really stand to attention. So I'm going to make this tail about 1 inch, 3/4 of an inch, something like that, shorter than my last tail, and I'm just putting one on top of the other. I'm twisting underneath my thumb, making that loop just a tad shorter, probably 1/4 to 1/2 inch shorter, scrunching it, pinching it underneath my thumb, giving it another twist, making my loop, making sure they're the same length. And they are, or close enough. Pinching underneath my finger, running this tail out, cutting it 1 inch or so shorter. And now we're on to that last ribbon, which is our orange glitter. And we're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to make this tail basically the same length as this chevron. Putting that underneath my thumb, twisting it so that pretty side will always be out. Making this loop basically the same length, just a tad smaller, probably 1/8 of an inch than the previous loop. I'm twisting it underneath my thumb, making that last loop, making sure that they're nearly the same size, and they are. And I'll run that tail out, cut off my ribbon, and that's all I want for that bow stack. Now, I am going to add, I believe, some of the deco mesh tubing, just because I think that's going to give it some sass and some whimsy. But first I need to secure this guy down, because the ribbons that I chose, I don't know if you could tell when I was creating, friends, but it is super duper thick. And so we've just made our bow stack, friends. It's not fluffed out, it's not cute yet, so I'm just going to kind of pull things in the right way. And because this is going on our Grapevine door hanger, I want all of my tails to be pointing down, a little bit different than a standard wreath. And this is just the rough fluff, friends. We're going to come back in here and do a better job of this in a short bit. We're just getting everybody going in the right direction here. That's all we're doing. Everything looks good. You just trim this off. I've got a little bit of wire sticking out here. And so what I'm going to do is leave the back set of loops, that 2.5, going exactly horizontal, and then I'm going to pull my two 1.5 inch into an X, but going the opposite direction. So we've got our chevron going one way, our orange glitter going another, and then that black and orange stripe 2.5 running right through the middle. How stinking cute is this going to be, guys? So we're going to end up putting this guy right here when it's time to do so. But first, we need to add our florals in. And we'll circle back to that deco mesh tubing in just a little bit here. And so the greenery I'm going to use here, friends, this is what it looks like. It's from Hobby Lobby. When it comes to florals and greenery, you know, I always try to buy my florals and greenery from Hobby Lobby. I'm not affiliated with them by any means. I just really like their quality. And what you'll quickly learn if you're new to wreath making is that florals and greenery are nearly always your biggest expense. So I like to make sure I mention here that Hobby Lobby has their florals and greenery, the entire department, on sale for 40% off basically every other week. So try to pay attention to that sales flyer. You can find it online when you need to go pick up some greenery. So if you're interested in this exact greenery, friends, the product code number is 778290. 778290, and original price was $9.99. I'm sure I probably got it for 40% off. So that's what I'm going to be using here. And most greenery bits, regardless of where you get them, friends, they will slide up and down. So as you can see, this will actually move, you know, in the direction that we want it to. So I'm going to actually scoot it to the ends for both pieces that I've cut so that they're fuller, because we know that we're going to add a bow, and that's actually going to be disguising the center point. So we'd like to see that as full as possible. So now that I've got them where I want them, I'm just kind of fluffing them out a little bit. And we're going to put them like so. And then the next thing we're going to add into this beauty, friends, is just an orange glittery branch. And forgive me, it didn't have a legible tag on it, so I'm not sure where I got this from. It's probably from last year. And because they're longer, we'll run those guys in back. And then we can always weed things through as we would like. I'd say that's far enough, so I'm going to go ahead. I don't want it to stick out too much farther than the width of my wreath, and so I'm going to trim off about 1 inch from each end here of this glitter branch, just in case it wants to peek through from our bow. We don't want that. Nobody wants to see that. So we're just giving it a little trim, an inch and a half or so. And then I'm going to do the same thing to our greenery stem, just trimming down our stems a bit. There we go. So there'll be something like that. Now I'm going to lay our greenery on like so. All right, friends, so I think we're gonna run the deco mesh tubing with our greenery and glitter twigs. Let's just see what that looks like. Now, if you've never worked with deco mesh tubing. It's made out of the exact same thing as the mesh that we use in our wreaths. It's just in tube form. And one thing I like to share, when you're working with tubing, friends, don't pull it too tightly or it'll flatten and lose its shape and, you know, be next to nothing. So just let it organically lay in your hand or in your attachment as you create it. And so what I'm thinking, friends, so we've got our orange glitter twigs in back, then we've got our greenery. So what I'm going to do is just place this mesh right there at that center point, leaving a couple of inches of tail to make sure that that guy doesn't come out. And I'm just going to make a pretty substantial loop, and we want those to be about the same size. And actually hold my bow up to it and make sure that looks good. And I'm going to make 4 loops of each, and I'm going to let it organically lay. I'm not going to try to pull it or coerce it. And then we'll cut that off, leaving a couple of inches of tail to make sure that guy doesn't come undone. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with the black. Making 4 loops. They're probably, I don't know, 6 to 8 inches in length. All right, now we'll cut that off. I'm going to actually secure this down with a 6-inch zip tie. And I'm going to secure it by itself first before we add it in, because if we try to wrap that around the pumpkin grapevine at the same time, there's going to be too much of a gap and things will get loose and squirrely, and we don't want that. So I'm going to secure this guy together first with my 6-inch zip tie. You could also use floral wire. I wouldn't really recommend a chenille stem for this part. And pull that guy tight, tight, tight. And then trim off that excess bit. And this is what we're left with, and we'll pull on it and fluff it a little bit once we get it in place. So now we need to add this guy right onto our wreath here. And again, you can use zip tie, you can use chenille stem for this part, whatever you've got handy. I'm going to use a zip tie. That's typically my go-to. And we're going to like double secure this guy. So first things first is our zip tie. I've got that in place where I want it. It's going around. I'll show you the back in a second. My grapevine pumpkin wreath. I'm going to cinch that guy pretty tight. There we go. Then I'm going to trim off this excess bit of zip tie. Let me show you how that looks on the back. You can see where I've attached that around both of those crossbars here on our grapevine pumpkin. And now I'm just going to kind of spread things around. This is going to be so cute, guys. And then last but not least, we're going to attach our bow. All right, friends, it's time to add our bow in. And so what I'm going to do here is form a V with a heavy gauge floral wire stem that's 18 inches in length, so that I've got that center point. I'm going to run that right around the middle, and I'm going to give it 2 or 3 tight twists. In fact, I'm going to grab my needle nose pliers and really get this guy nice and secure. There we go. Perfect. And then making sure those deco mesh tubing loops are laying the right way because they like to get squirrely. We're going to lay this bow right on top of this stack. Once we do, I'm going to give it a couple of twists, and then I'm going to pause, flip that guy over, make sure it's still laying where I want it to, and it seems to be. And we'll flip it over again. And again, using those needle nose pliers. In total, I'll probably twist it 5 or 6 times. Get it nice and taut on there. And then we'll take our snips here and just trim off the ends of those wire bits so that they're not in our way. And I'm going to take my needle nose pliers, guys, and just pinch those little bitty ends together just to keep them from being pokey. And then I'm going to curl them back in so they're almost going back into that grapevine so that it's not sharp to poke us or our door. All right, so now it's time to fluff our bow, and I always start from the back here. So I'm just going to fluff up that 2.5 inch so it's going horizontally across. And then I'll make sure my tails are coming down nicely. And then we're going to make those 1.5 inch loops go in an X. So just fluffing those guys up. I'm going to hold that with my thumb so it doesn't spin. And make sure those tails are all going where we want them to. All right, and now I'm going to trim my ends. You can either dovetail or angle cut. I'm going to angle cut today. I like to cut them at varying lengths. I just think it gives it some whimsy. But it's your door hanger. You certainly cut them how you'd like, friends. So stinking cute. And the last thing we need to do is just run our finger over those tails to give them some height. I just put them between my 2 fingers here, friends. And because they're wired, they'll take the shape you want them to. And that is it. How stinking cute is that? This is actually for my own front door, and I'm super excited to hang it. I'm going to add a picture of this on the door so you can see what it looks like hanging. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps my little channel to grow. Thanks for spending time with me today, friends. Happy crafting.